Good question. The Sunday gathering is where we have the most oversight and control. And what I mean by that is we can't be everywhere at once. So the conversations that are happening between church members in text messages or over coffee, or even everything that's happening in community groups or discipleship groups, we're not there for all of that. We can help to put good structures in place and help them to launch well and that sort of thing. But we're not everywhere at once. So I guess to answer your question, the easiest place to defend the gospel from everything else, where we have the most ability to do that, is the Sunday gathering. So that's why we very intentionally plan and structure, because that's one area where we can say when the church gathers, we can make sure that the integrity of the gospel is preserved. Whereas it's a little bit harder during the week, and all of everything else the church has going on. Even with that, you can mitigate, you're very careful about who you put in charge to lead community groups and discipleship groups, and you maintain good communication with all of your leaders. So at the end of the day, you can't protect the gospel everywhere on every front, which we want to. And we'd love to be able to. We do the best we can Sunday, and we try to build it into the culture with how we're raising up leaders to be influential throughout the week. At the end of the day, we don't have the control we think we have. Even with Sunday, we don't have the control we think we have. The Lord either works in hearts or he doesn't, and draws people into the gospel or he doesn't. So that's the second. So one, I would just say do the best you can with Sunday, and do the best you can to raise up leaders who will have integrity throughout the week. But the other side of that coin is just remember that you are never going to win a heart for the gospel. Only the Spirit does that. So what I'm saying is it's also just a huge exercise in trust. So that's kind of a non-answer. I don't know. I think you do the best you can with the resources God gives you, and you trust Him. And I don't mean for that to be a cop-out answer. I really think that's it. Because some people who you think are just absolutely faithful and at the dead center of everything, they leave on a moment's notice over something silly, and you're going, whoa, where? The relationship is in a very different place from where you thought it was, and that's obvious. There's some sort of disconnect between the gospel and their heart there. So I don't know. Be careful who you lay hands on to become other leaders. I'll tell you, that's a mistake I've made personally. Did you say it a little louder? I'm sorry.
What's your opinion
On
on megachurches?
mega churches?
How much is
That's an excellent question. And
How many are you?
yeah, sure. So understand that much of what I'm going to share is my opinion. Our church is about 120 people on a Sunday. And we are already looking to plant again. I've never been a part of a mega church. I was raised in small churches. So one, that's what I'm used to. And two, I think it's not impossible. Some churches do it. But the larger a church gets, the more difficult shepherding becomes. And the reason I say that is if we're looking to Jesus as our model for a shepherd, he says, I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. They hear my voice, and so I think that there's something quite direct and literal that we can take from that is we need to know our sheep. And so when the church becomes hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, it becomes very difficult to know your sheep. And as those of you who have preached regularly, you know that if you and I both pick we're both going to preach Matthew 10. But to you to your sheep and me to mine, the main truths will still be there, but they're going to be different sermons because you know your sheep and because I know my sheep. I guess my thought is just that the more difficult it becomes to know your sheep, the harder it becomes to shepherd effectively. So, but at the same time, like I think of the Sovereign Grace Church in Glen Mills, Pennsylvania, where Mark Prater, our director, he's one of the elders there. It's a huge church, way too big for me. I mean, it's I don't know. I think it's like a 1,500 person church, but they have like 11 or 12 elders who have kind of divided up the congregation. And also, because they're so huge and have so many resources, they've planted, I think they've planted like 11 churches in the last 20 years, which is pretty great. 50 people and an elder, go. 50 people and an elder, go. And so they've done some excellent work that their size has allowed them to do. Where I would personally be very careful to guard is, well, my father put it this way. My father's a pastor as well. I think I mentioned that. But he said, when the church gets so big that the pastor does not know the names of the little children, then maybe it's too big. Like you need to know your people. So whether or not you divide the congregation up into multiple, like this elder oversees here and this one here, okay. I personally at that point would rather plant a church. Personally, I'm not saying that churches that get larger are wrong. I'm not saying that at all. That's probably fine. So maybe some of that has to do with, and understand in my context, the size of the average church in Montana is maybe 50 or 60 people. So for us to be a church of 120 people, we're already making a plan to plant again. But that's kind of specific to our context, so maybe that matters as well. So I don't know if it's a right or wrong. I can just tell you my preference, but I don't know. What do you think? So in other words, are you saying, like in some places, even not far from here, churches, for safety reasons, they can't have large gatherings, they can't be loud?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they cannot sing.
Yeah.
They cannot even preach. Yes.
Yeah. I think that the Lord is big enough to meet us there. And I think you do the best you can. Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory. Do it all for the glory of God. I think you apply wisdom to a situation, and for this church to meet regularly and consistently, this is what it has to look like. We have to be quiet. We can only meet for half an hour. I mean, whatever. I think you do the best you can with what you have. I think that's what the Lord asks of us, to be as faithful as we can in whatever situation He puts us in. So again, yeah, that's where context comes into play. If you are in a place where you can have a public church, that it can be loud and everything, do it. Absolutely. That's not every situation, though, as you know. And so, yeah, it's highly situational. It's very situational, I think. But yeah, so I don't think churches are right or wrong. They do what they have to do based on their context, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you one more example. In the United States, obviously, we're free to gather publicly and freely, everything. So I don't understand when people in the United States. I knew one pastor. He came to a church in the town next to mine. The church was already established. It has its own building. It's been in that town for 100 years. It's very established. He decided, no, we're going to sell the church building and we're going to divide into 3 different house churches. And I said, why? We don't have to do that here. Here you have the opportunity to be public and to be present and to interact with the neighborhood. Some places do need to hide and go underground, but we don't here. And so he was doing it just because he thought, I don't know what he thought. Maybe he thought it was more spiritual or something. But but it was confusing to the town. It was a small town of 8,000 people. They're all rural people. They're conservative people. And so they are used to churches gathering. And so why do you take your church and start meeting in people's basements? You don't have to do that. I think he was doing it. I don't know why he was doing it. I could speculate. But in that context, I thought that was inappropriate. If you have the opportunity to be a public witness, you should.
Didn't Francis Chan do that?
Yeah.
Is it him?
No, this was a man in my town. And in the town next to mine, yeah. Yeah, I cannot vouch for Francis Chan on that particular issue. I cannot. Yeah, yeah. So how and where churches meet is not one size fits all for the entire world. In some places, it's probably better and wiser to have a small church that meets maybe privately. Other places, maybe a large church publicly. You have to discern your situation and context and seek the Lord. What is the best way to serve the brothers and sisters and to reach this community? Yeah, you'll need to think through that. In my setting, smaller churches are better. I have no problem saying that. They're more appropriate. They're going to reach people better because we all exist in small communities where I live. I was telling some of you, again, Montana is the 4th largest state by geography in America. It has the 4th largest as far by land, but we only have 1 million people in the entire state. And so very, very rural. So it's very odd for a church to have more than even 150 people or 200 people. It's very odd, very rare. It's much more common for a small town to have a church of 70 to 100 people. Yeah. Yeah. How do I choose elders? Yeah, that's a great question. The way we identify who our next elders will be, we give men in the church opportunities to practice leading, basically, and we see how they do. Well, one, you want to observe a man for his character and his morality. I mean, the Scripture gives us so many qualifications for an elder, in terms of how he governs his family, all of these things. So you pay attention to that. So what we do, like I said, we have community groups. They meet in people's homes during the week to talk more about the text from Sunday, to pray together. They always share a meal together. And if there is a man who we think, yeah, I think he could be an elder someday, we ask him, will you lead a community group? And if he says, oh, no, I don't want to lead anything, we say, okay, that's our answer. If he can't lead a group of 8 to 14 people, he's not going to be a shepherd over the entire church. So we give him that opportunity. Yeah, I think I'll lead a community group. Okay. So we teach him how, we show him. And then it's kind of like, we say that our community groups are like mini church. They're like our small church. So we watch and we observe, how does he shepherd this small group of people in his community group? How does he care for them in that? And we meet with them regularly. We meet with our community group leaders once per month. We all get together for a meal, the elders with the community group leaders. And if a man demonstrates that he can lead and shepherd a small group of people, if the time is right, we would approach him and say, what do you think about entering into church leadership? And again, the first qualification for an elder is the man has to want to do it. Scripture says, if a man aspires to the office of elder, he aspires to a good thing. So if someone said, oh, I don't really want to do that, but I will if you want me to, we say, no. You need to want to. Because like we talked about earlier today, not from compulsion, not from obligation. He has to desire, yes, I love these people and I want to help shepherd them. Okay. And so then we have something to work with. And so Sovereign Grace has really great ordination standards that we start at that point to make sure the man is in a good place theologically and as far as his character goes. It's a long process. It takes about 1 year to finish the ordination process, usually, with Sovereign Grace, and it's very good. So that's what we do. We give them an opportunity to lead in a community group, and we see how they do. And if they do well, then we would ask them to take the next step. My dad has many sayings. One of them is, all you can do is run the flag up the pole and see who salutes. In other words, you put a flag up the pole and pay attention and see who stops it. So he's saying, give them an opportunity and see who takes it. Yeah, that's a good question. And that's one thing I really appreciate about Sovereign Grace. They have a really good system for that. Yes. Yeah, we do not rotate them. We do not do that. Some churches do that. That's not common. I don't think any church in Sovereign Grace does that. So no, we do not rotate them. I have seen that that's common in a lot of rural churches in Montana, but we take the opinion more that if God makes somebody to be an elder, that they are an elder. And if someone wants to step away from being an elder, they say, this is too much, or I have too much, I need to take care of my family more or something. Okay, yeah, we would let somebody step away and maybe think about bringing them on later, but we don't have like, you are an elder for 3 years and then you take 1 year off or anything like that. In general, I agree with him. I don't think that churches are wrong if they have multiple services. I would not say they are in sin. But what I would say is I do think it is best or ideal if a church can have one gathering. And that's okay. As a pastor, that would stress me out. Honestly, this would, to have two different music teams, two different congregations, really two different cultures, depending on who is there. I would. Oh, God bless you. Thank you so much. I think that would be difficult for me as a pastor, because I think I would feel like I was shepherding two different flocks. Now, maybe some men God has equipped to do that. I think I would have a hard time personally. So, in my opinion, I would rather see two small churches than one big church that had to meet separately, because then the people don't even know one another necessarily in the two different gatherings. So, again, that's just my opinion. I know good churches and very godly, faithful men who pastor churches with multiple gatherings. And that's okay. I remember the evangelical free church in my town. The pastor was going to be out of town, and he asked me, "Hey, would you preach for me on Sunday?" And on this Sunday, I said, "Yeah, sure, I can do that." And on Saturday, I called him. I said, "Hey, what time is your service?" He said, "Well, the first one is at 8." I said, "Okay, so you have two. So the second?" He goes, "Well, the second's at 10. And the third one's at 11. And I was, oh my goodness. I preached 3 times and I got sick that day. Is there may be other Christians in this city. They're not unbelievers, but they are outsiders to this church. But they come to visit. That's interesting to me. So that's an argument from inference. But yeah, I don't know at one point. I don't know at what point the cities started having multiple church bodies. I don't know. I wonder if the priority of the early church was establish a church in each city first, and then they grew from there. I don't know. I do know that, again, if Ephesians 3 is true, that it is through the church that the wisdom of God is made known, more churches, more healthy churches, is better than less. Do people make the argument that there should be one church per city? People do? Really? What we can say for certain, Jesus did not finish building his church in the first century. So, I don't believe he did not intend for a church in Ephesus and Philippi and Antioch and Corinth and Rome and that's it. You know. So it's kind of, because there is so much about the early church that we should model after, I believe. As we continue to plant churches. I say when we talk about different towns or cities to plant churches, and people say, well, aren't there already good churches there? I say, yeah, probably. That's not the point. Is every person in that city a person who worships Jesus? No? Then there's room for more churches. It's my opinion. I'm wording that very strongly on purpose. I just think we need to think about church planning that way. There's room for more churches until Jesus returns, I think. But it is, anytime within a city or a town there can be an expression of unity among true believers, I think that's excellent. I think that's excellent. Yeah, absolutely. Good. These are hard things to think through. These are good things to think through. I had one late girl tell me, "Oh, you guys are part of Sovereign Grace. We love Sovereign Grace." Yeah. Yeah, why don't you guys want to come on a Sunday? No, we don't. We don't believe in the organized church, and we don't understand why every Christian in Bozeman can't just all be a part of the same gathering. And I'm just like, who would organize that? What would the liturgy be like? What would we sing? What would our polity be? What would our doctrine be? I mean, to say that every Christian, it's impossible. What are you talking about? So it's easier. What they were saying is easier said than done. But at the same time, it is a valid and good work to think through how can the Christians who are all in one place express their unity in the body. That's a really good thing to think through. And I don't claim to have a lot of great answers. In heaven, we'll be okay. That'll be nice. How do we point people toward that now? I don't know. But if you guys become ministers, you will need to think through how to relate to other churches in your city. That's a great thing to think through. And I will encourage you, wherever you can, have a good relationship with another gospel church. Please do it. Because you'll want friends and you'll want allies. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
What method of filter would you use to discern to what extent,
Mm-hmm.
and what, obviously the major doctrines we won't compromise,
Yeah.
but what would be something that we would think but might be a big deal?
I had one new pastor come to town, and I just wanted to greet him and welcome him and take him out to lunch. And at our first time meeting, he told me he was a Universalist. Okay, there's probably not a lot our churches can do together. And he denied the doctrine of hell entirely. He denied penal substitution. He did not believe that Jesus absorbed the wrath of the Father on the cross. I mean, he was just well outside of orthodoxy. So that was kind of the end of that. There wasn't a lot we could do there. I think a lot of it comes. So Ted, who's a friend of mine for Calvary, is Calvary Chapel present around here? Calvary Chapel, is that denomination present? In Kenya it is? Yeah. I like a lot of Calvary Chapel guys. We're different in some ways, but I know the denomination well enough to know that they're brothers, and we agree on all of the major things, so I have no problem associating with them. So a lot of it is just researching maybe the group of churches they're a part of, but then just get to know guys. I've just made a habit of when a new pastor comes to town, I take him out to coffee or lunch and just get to know him. Yeah. Different views on end times. Okay, that's fine. I'm friends with cessationists. That's fine. It's. I mean, you learn to discern what are hills to die on and not. I'm going to die. The Trinity. We need the Trinity. We need the authority of Scripture. Yes. Things like that. But there's a lot of leeway when it comes to just linking arms with other churches in town yeah, I think you can be pretty loose. They don't have to be just like you. Apostles' Creed is a good place to start, but go from there. Yeah. But we're the only Reformed continuationist church in town, so if we were only friends with people just like us, we'd have no friends. We have people in our church who disagree with some aspects of our statement of faith, and that's okay. As members, you could come to our church and be a Wesleyan dispensationalist, cessationist, and still technically be a member in good standing at our church. Very different from our doctrine. As far as eldership goes specifically, the elders of Sovereign Grace do have a specific statement of faith that they need to sign off on. And it's like the full denominational statement of faith. So what we've done, the whole little white book, and the full one for elders. Yeah. But also, let me add this as well. We have one guy in the church. Have you all read anything by Steve Wellum, Dr. Steve Wellum? Okay. Steve Wellum's editor is a member at our church. He's a brilliant man. He did his PhD at Southern Seminary, and he's also a Harvard lawyer. Like, he's just a really smart guy. And he can sign off on 100% of our doctrine, with the exception, he says, I think what he calls himself a qualified cessationist. Okay. So we've been meeting lately. What I've learned, I think, can be solved with conversation. I think that more often than not, that we're talking about the same thing, but we call it something different. With a lot of things between cessation, I think that the difference between continuationist and cessationist is not like this. I think it can be like this, like really, really close. So we're talking with Michael. His name is Michael. And I'm explaining what I mean to. This is what I understand prophecy is and is not, and these sorts of things. And he's listening to everything. Oh, okay. And he's realizing, well, I believe all of that, but we don't call it that. Okay, so we are working hard to make room for him to be an elder because we want him really badly. But yeah, but at the end of the day, denominationally, we have a statement of faith that all the elders sign off on. But we keep it under very close watch. So it's the sort of thing that the cessationists at our church are very comfortable, is what I'm trying to say. They're very comfortable because I think, because we are conservative continuationists. I would call that, if I were to categorize that, I would maybe say that that was a timely word of wisdom to share with you all. I wasn't planning on sharing it, but I woke up this morning with a heavy burden to do so. Now, a cessationist could do the exact same thing, but he might talk about it differently. Through some thought and prayer, I think it would be helpful to share this lesson with you all. Okay, that's what I'm saying too. I might be calling it something different. I might be using more, I guess, charismatic language and saying, I believe the Lord impressed me to share this with you all, And I mean, another example, in a cessationist church, it would be totally normal for me to come up to you and say, brother, I just really want to share this passage with you, and I hope it ministers to you. Okay, that's pretty normal. Where the way I would prefer to say it is, I was reading scripture this morning, and the Lord laid you on my heart, and I believe it would please God to share this with you, and I hope it ministers to you. That sounds a little bit more spontaneous and charismatic, and that's what I believe. So anyway, but both of those things could happen in both of those contexts, and we might talk about it differently. But the same thing happens. It's funny to me, even at very cessationist churches, when anytime someone says, well, the Lord led me to do this, I say, how? Where? What chapter and verse, right? We would all admit that God leads his people in ways other than just the printed text. He grants peace, he grants wisdom, these sorts of things in the moment. We would all affirm that. Anyway, it's a longer, I'm kind of rambling now, it's a longer discussion. My short answer is, Twice a year, we choose a name randomly. No. So in our church, we have only ever had one time when we actually had formal church discipline. And it was awful. It was a horrible thing. I won't even tell you the story, but a man turned out to be a very bad guy. And when we first started church discipline with him, he left. It's very rare that anybody actually stays a member long enough to actually go through the entire process. But we do have avenues for church discipline. Basically, if a member is in unrepentant sin and they've been confronted by the elders, they've been met with, they've been given work to do, and like, this is where we need you to improve if you're going to remain an elder or a member of the church. And if they refuse to do it, we have the ability to remove them from the fellowship. We've never had to. It's never come to that. Again, the only person that we ever initiated church discipline with, he disappeared. He took off. But we do, which I think that's one important part of membership. You can't place non-members under church discipline, especially in the United States legally. If you try to place a non-member under church discipline, everybody sues each other in the United States, and churches have shut down because they try to discipline somebody who's not a member. They turn around and go to court with the church and take all their money, and it's horrible. So that's one purpose that membership serves. Someone commits to, yes, I will support this church and support the doctrine of this church. Well, when they stop doing that, you can say, hey, you committed to doing this, and now you're way out of line. What are we going to do about it? And you start the church discipline process. And as of right now, legal systems and judges in America will still honor a signed church covenant, and they will. That's admissible in court. And so people can't shut down churches legally if they've joined the church. So, we've never had to. I mean, we did remove that guy from membership, but he was already gone. A big name in 9 Marks, Michael Hinson. You know that name? Michael Hinson? No, Michael Lawrence. I'm sorry. Michael Lawrence. He wrote Biblical Theology in the Life of the Church. He pastors Hinson Baptist Church in Portland, Oregon. He lives in the highest gay per capita community in the United States. So membership is a way to protect the church legally as well. But no, if someone who is in the church, who was living in, they haven't joined the church, but they're living in sin, we would try to confront them and talk to them. It's just when a membership covenant is in place, they may not stay, but they do have the obligation to stay and work to figure it out, and the other members of the church will pursue them as well. Where someone who just shows up to church once a month, maybe twice a month, but they're not really part of the body, it's like, oh, what can we do? I don't know. This person, it's like the difference between living with a person and actually getting married. Like they've not committed themselves here, and they can leave at any time. where if someone has joined the church, there's an understood obligation. They stand before the church, they make vows to the church, and that way everybody knows if this person is ever in trouble or in sin, we are all going to come and help them. So that's typically how that works. But yes, we would, of course, we would want to address sin in anybody. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
How would church discipline look like? What would that look like in your context? Because I don't know, I'm not really, I don't really know the procedure
Yeah.
that's taken.
I'll tell you one example of something that happened in our church. We had a husband and wife join the church. I did their wedding. Do you all know the expression shotgun wedding? Anybody know that expression? Okay. I want you to imagine this. Imagine this in your mind. A man and woman are getting married, and standing behind them is the father of the bride holding a shotgun because they got things out of order. Usually, the woman becomes pregnant first, and then so the father with the shotgun, you're going to marry her, right? Okay, that's a shotgun. That's a shotgun wedding. So this was a shotgun wedding, and they're a precious couple. They're faithful members of the church, but early on in their marriage, especially, they had some very hard times, and he dealt with anger. He was such an angry guy. You two are going to start a devotional life together. You will be reading your Bible and praying together. We helped them put some things in place that would actually be healthy for their marriage, to help preserve it and save it, that they didn't have before. And it came from church leadership. It's like, you're a member of this church. You've committed to biblical morality. We're going to help you. Here's what you need. And they did. They submitted to it. And they're doing pretty well now. So that was church discipline. We tend to think of church discipline as always a bad thing. Like, oh no, they're under church discipline. They're going to be kicked out. No, that's the goal of church discipline is to bring someone back. And in that case, it did. It brought them back. We gave them some really helpful steps and said, if you are going to continue as members in good standing in this church, we need you to follow this plan. And they did. So it's very situational. It can look different ways. That's how it looked in that case. But I think it's the elders providing structure for this is what we need to see happen to fix this, and you need to follow it. If a man is living with another woman, step one, stop it. Move out. Come back to your wife. Things like that. It's the elders saying, if we're going to continue in relationship with you, we need to see some changes, and here's what they are.